In the lawless American West, where justice often belonged to the fastest gun or the strongest fist, there lived a woman whose story deserves to be remembered. Her name was Martha Hayes, known to most as Kate. She was a rancher who built her life through hard work in a land that showed no mercy to the weak. One dark autumn night, violent men rode onto her ranch and crushed her hand with a rock, believing pain would force her to surrender everything she had built. They expected her to beg, to sell her land, or to flee in defeat. They believed breaking her body would break her spirit. They were wrong. Kate did not collapse. She did not run. She did not give up her ranch. She kept cooking. To outsiders, it looked like survival, an injured woman doing whatever she could to endure. But inside her small frontier kitchen, something far more dangerous was forming. Kate was not only preparing food. She was listening, saving, and planning. She was crafting a revenge so patient, so calculated, and so precise that it would destroy her enemies without a single gunshot. What followed shocked the entire territory. The men who tried to break her lost everything: power, reputation, and control, while Kate rose to become one of the most successful ranchers in Colorado Territory. This is not a story of rescue or mercy. It is the true tale of a woman who turned pain into strategy and proved that real strength is not found in weapons, but in intelligence, courage, and an unbreakable will. Martha Catherine Hayes was born in the spring of 1852 in a small farming community in Missouri, at a time when the lands west of the Mississippi felt like another world altogether. Dangerous, uncertain, and full of promise. Her father earned his living as a blacksmith while also farming their modest plot of land, and her mother came from a long line of resilient frontier women who had learned through hardship how to survive whatever life demanded of them. From an early age, Kate understood that work was not something to fear or avoid, but something that gave life meaning and strength. As soon as she was old enough to follow instructions, Kate helped wherever she was needed. She worked in the family garden, learning the rhythm of planting and harvest, discovering which herbs could heal and which plants were dangerous. She came to understand patience, the long, careful tending required to make things grow in stubborn soil. Her mother taught her to cook, not just simple meals, but practical cooking that could stretch limited food to feed many mouths, turning tough cuts of meat into nourishing meals through skill and care. Kate was unlike many girls her age who dreamed of city life or marriage. She preferred the open air, physical labor, and the satisfaction that came from building or repairing something useful. Her father recognized her strength and determination and began teaching her skills typically reserved for sons. She learned how to shoe horses, repair tools, and read the weather by watching the sky and the land. She learned to work with livestock confidently, understanding that animals responded to calm assurance rather than force. By the age of 12, Kate could outwork most grown men in the fields, doing so without complaint or the need for recognition. Her parents believed in leading by example, teaching her that honest labor and fair treatment of others were the foundations of survival. Kate carried those lessons deeply within her, forming a strength of character as solid as the land itself. Unaware that one day she would need every bit of it to face trials far greater than anything her childhood had prepared her for. When Kate turned 18, a restless hunger began to grow inside her, the same wanderlust that gripped so many young people of that era. Stories flowed back from the Western territories through traders and travelers, tales of vast open land where a determined person could claim a future with their own hands, where hard work mattered more than family name or social standing. Missouri had begun to feel confining to Kate, a place where lives were planned generations in advance and expectations left little room for ambition or reinvention. She felt certain she was meant for something larger and more demanding than the small farming community that had shaped her childhood. Kate spoke seriously with her parents about heading west. Though they feared for her safety in a land where law was thin and danger was common, they understood that trying to restrain a spirit like hers would only lead to bitterness. With heavy hearts but clear eyes, they gave her their blessing. They provided what little money they could spare, a reliable horse her father had trained himself, and carefully chosen supplies for the long journey ahead. In the spring of 1870, Kate joined a wagon train bound for Colorado Territory, traveling alongside families and lone fortune seekers, all chasing their own versions of land, freedom, and opportunity. The journey west took many brutal months. The plains seemed endless, the rivers unforgiving, and the mountain passes tested both bodies and wagons to their limits. Kate quickly proved her worth to the group. When illness spread, she gathered herbs and prepared remedies. When food grew scarce, she knew how to cook meals that preserved strength without wasting precious supplies. When wagons broke down far from settlements, she was often the first to help, her small, capable hands reaching places others could not. The wagon master, a seasoned frontiersman hardened by years on the trail, told Kate before they reached their destination that she possessed more true frontier spirit than many of the men traveling with them. He meant it as the highest praise he could give. When Kate finally arrived in Colorado territory, she stepped into a settlement known as Broken Ridge, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering mountains. The town was young, barely 5 years old, with a single main street lined by a general store, saloon, blacksmith shop, small church, and a scattering of other rough buildings. Beyond it stretched ranches and farms claimed by those determined to hold onto what they had carved from the wilderness. Kate looked at Broken Ridge not as it was, but as what it could become. She saw possibility. She saw a future. She saw home. Kate spent her first months in Broken Ridge taking any honest work she could find. She cooked meals at the saloon, helped customers and stocked shelves at the general store, and took in laundry for families who could afford to pay someone else for that exhausting labor. She saved every penny she earned, living as cheaply as possible, eating the simplest food and sleeping in a cramped room above the general store that barely fit a narrow bed and a wooden crate that served as both table and chair. Every waking thought was focused on one goal. Kate wanted land of her own. She wanted a ranch where she could raise cattle and horses and build something lasting through her own effort, not through marriage or inheritance. Most people in town thought she was foolish. A woman barely 20 years old, with no husband and no powerful connections, trying to run a ranch in such harsh country seemed laughable to them. Kate ignored their doubts, having learned long ago not to let other people's opinions define her limits. After nearly 2 years of relentless work, she finally saved enough for a down payment on a piece of land about 5 miles outside town. It was not good land. Rocky, unforgiving, and battered by brutal winters, which was the only reason she could afford it. The previous owner had given up and walked away after years of failure. The property held a small cabin barely fit for shelter, a barn leaning so badly it threatened to collapse, and roughly 200 acres split between poor grazing land and scrubby rock. Where others saw a lost cause, Kate saw opportunity. She moved onto the land in early spring of 1873 and immediately began working from sunrise until long after dark each day. She repaired the cabin first, patching the roof, sealing the gaps between logs, and replacing broken windows with whatever materials she could find or afford. Next, she tackled the barn, cutting trees from her own land to brace the structure and reinforce the walls until it stood straight and secure enough to protect animals. Kate spent long, punishing days clearing brush and hauling stones from the grazing land, her hands blistering, bleeding, and slowly hardening into calluses. She dug a proper well closer to the cabin, lining it carefully to keep the water clean. Every improvement was made by her own hands and stubborn determination. Each night she collapsed into bed exhausted, barely able to eat before sleep took her, yet filled with deep satisfaction. She knew she was building something real, something that belonged entirely to her. By the end of that first brutal year, Kate had managed to purchase 6 head of cattle and 2 horses using the last of her savings and a small bank loan. The banker had been hesitant to lend to a single woman, but Kate's growing reputation for reliability and hard work had spread through the valley, and his wife insisted Kate was more trustworthy than many men he financed without question. Kate named her operation the Circle K Ranch, burning the brand into a wooden sign she proudly hung above the barn door. She knew she was only at the beginning and that success would take years more effort and luck. What she could not have known was that her progress had drawn the attention of men who believed women had no right to own land or power. Men who would soon try to take by force what Kate had earned through sheer will. Living about a mile down the valley from Kate's Circle K ranch was a man named Clayton Jessup, and from the moment he realized that Kate was actually succeeding against all odds, he decided she was a problem that needed to be handled. Jessup was the type of man the frontier produced too often. Someone who came west not to build honestly, but to take whatever he could through force, intimidation, and quiet violence when necessary. He controlled nearly 2,000 acres, land he had gathered through a mix of legal purchases and far more questionable methods that had driven several smaller ranchers out of the valley under circumstances no one cared to investigate too closely. Jessup employed half a dozen ranch hands who were more enforcers than cowboys. They carried guns openly and followed Jessup's orders without concern for right or wrong. When Jessup turned his attention toward Kate, his harassment began subtly. Cattle Kate turned out to graze would vanish by nightfall, scattered into distant hills where it took days to recover them. Fence posts she had worked hard to set would be pulled out overnight, forcing her to redo exhausting labor. Water sources along her property line would suddenly become fouled, requiring her to move her herd farther away for clean water. Kate knew exactly who was responsible, but proof was another matter. Broken Ridge's law amounted to a part-time sheriff who avoided conflict with powerful men like Jessup. Reasoning that open hostility would only escalate things, Kate decided to try a peaceful approach. One morning she rode to Jessup's ranch to speak with him directly, hoping that honest conversation might resolve the growing conflict. She found Jessup outside his barn, a tall man in his 40s with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. Kate calmly explained that she was simply trying to make an honest living, that there was room in the valley for both their operations, and that she wanted no trouble. Jessup listened with thinly veiled contempt. When she finished, he spat tobacco juice near her boots and told her that women who tried to do men's work usually ended up getting hurt. He suggested she sell her land to him while she still could, claiming he would offer a fair price. Kate felt anger surge through her, but she kept her voice steady. She told Jessup her ranch was not for sale at any price, that she had worked too hard to give it up. Jessup's smile vanished, revealing the cold calculation beneath. He warned her that refusing him was a serious mistake, that he had many ways of making life unbearable for those who did not cooperate. Kate met his gaze without flinching and told him her answer would not change. She rode away with her head held high, refusing to show the fear twisting in her stomach. Kate knew she had just made a dangerous enemy, but she also understood that showing weakness to a man like Jessup would only invite worse treatment. She had been raised to stand firm for what was right, even when it was frightening and the odds were stacked against her. That evening, back at her ranch, Kate carefully cleaned and checked her father's old rifle, making sure it was loaded and ready. She hoped she would never need it, but she also knew that hope alone offered little protection against men who respected only power. 3 weeks passed after Kate's confrontation with Clayton Jessup. Then, on a cool autumn evening when the first signs of winter dusted the distant mountain peaks with snow, Kate was inside her cabin preparing a simple supper after a long, punishing day repairing fence line on the far edge of her property. The work had left her shoulders aching and her hands sore despite thick gloves. She was looking forward to little more than beans and cornbread, maybe a cup of coffee if she could stay awake long enough to drink it, and then an early night's rest before dawn brought another demanding day. She had just set her heavy skillet on the stove when she heard it, multiple horses approaching fast. The thud of hooves carried clearly through the still evening air. Alarm shot through her. Honest visitors called out from a distance, especially when riding toward an isolated cabin. These riders did not. Kate reached for her loaded rifle and stepped onto the porch, holding it ready but not yet aimed, clinging to the faint hope that this might be travelers needing help. That hope vanished the moment the riders pulled to a stop in her yard. 5 men sat in their saddles, dust hanging around them. Clayton Jessup was in the center, flanked by 4 armed ranch hands. Their expressions left no doubt about their purpose. Jessup sat easily, calm and confident, like a man who knew nothing would stop him. He told Kate he had come to make one final offer. He would pay half of what her land was worth, and she had until sunrise to accept. If she refused, things would become unpleasant. Kate forced her voice to stay steady as she told him her answer had not changed. Her ranch was not for sale, and he and his men needed to leave her property immediately. Jessup's smile vanished. His eyes turned cold. He gave a slight nod. Before Kate could raise her rifle, 2 men dismounted and rushed the porch. One struck the rifle from her hands before she could fire. Kate fought back with everything she had, kicking, clawing, biting, refusing to submit without a struggle. But two large men against one woman was not a fair fight. They seized her arms and forced her to her knees as Jessup dismounted slowly and climbed the porch steps, unhurried and confident, knowing no one would intervene. The moments that followed would haunt Kate for months and ignite the rage that fueled her revenge. Jessup stood over her and told her she needed to learn her place, that stubborn women who refused to back down had to be taught lessons they would never forget. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a heavy rock, the kind used to drive fence stakes. He told his men to hold Kate's right hand flat against the porch railing. Kate realized what was about to happen and fought with renewed desperation, but the men were stronger. They forced her hand down, spreading her fingers and pinning them in place. Jessup raised the rock and brought it down with brutal force. The sound of bones shattering mixed with Kate's scream in a moment of deliberate cruelty that seemed to freeze time. Pain unlike anything she had ever known tore through her body, radiating from her crushed hand up her arm. Her vision went white, her stomach lurched, and nausea overwhelmed her. Jessup and his men left her crumpled on the porch, warning her that next time would be worse and that she had 1 week to leave or they would burn her cabin with her inside. Kate managed to crawl indoors before losing consciousness. She survived the night in agony, too injured and shocked to even consider writing for help. Lighting a lamp with her left hand was a struggle. Her right hand swelled grotesquely, darkening with bruises. She did not sleep at all, sitting at her small table with her shattered hand resting on a folded cloth, tears falling not only from pain but from rage and the fear that this time Jessup might have done something she could not overcome. When dawn finally arrived after that endless night of pain, Kate made a decision that would shape everything that followed. She could have surrendered then, sold her land for whatever Clayton Jessup offered, and fled the valley alive but broken. Many people would have done exactly that, and no one would have blamed them. But Kate was not most people. Somewhere during that long night, through agony so intense it made her sick, she found something inside herself stronger than pain, stronger than fear, stronger than the voice urging her to quit. She found an iron determination that promised she would make Jessup and his men pay, no matter the cost or the time it required. Before anything else, Kate knew she had to save her hand. Leaving it untreated could mean permanent loss or infection that could kill her. Using only her left hand and her teeth, she somehow saddled her horse, a task that took far longer than usual and left her drenched in sweat and shaking from pain. The 5-mile ride to Broken Ridge was torture, every movement sending fresh waves of agony through her shattered hand. Still, she stayed in the saddle and reached the town doctor without collapsing. Dr. Samuel Morrison had practiced frontier medicine for more than 20 years and had seen nearly every injury imaginable, but even he was shocked by the damage. He told Kate that several bones were shattered and that tendons and ligaments were likely torn. Even with treatment, he warned, she might never regain full use of her hand. There was a real chance it would be limited to only basic tasks. Kate listened calmly, then asked the only question that mattered: what was the best outcome possible if she followed his instructions and endured the recovery? The doctor told her that with exceptional toughness and persistence, she might regain 70 to 80% of its function, but never what it once was. Kate met his eyes and told him to do whatever was necessary. Giving up was not an option. The doctor spent over an hour setting the bones, a process so painful Kate had to bite down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. When he finished, her hand was tightly splinted and immobilized to heal properly. He offered laudanum for the pain, but Kate refused. She needed her mind clear. She had planning to do. Kate returned to her ranch that afternoon to find Jessup's men had been there again while she was gone. 2 more of her cattle had been killed and left to rot in her yard as a warning. An entire section of fence she had repaired only a week earlier had been torn down. For many people, this added cruelty would have been the breaking point. For Kate, it marked a shift. She moved beyond fear and outrage and into cold calculation. Her mind focused on one problem alone: how to take revenge on men with greater resources, greater numbers, and no hesitation about using violence. That evening, Kate stood in her small cabin kitchen and looked through the supplies in her pantry and root cellar. It was there that the first real piece of her plan took shape. Kate had always been an exceptional cook, able to turn the simplest ingredients into meals people remembered. Her mother had taught her more than recipes. She had taught her how flavors worked together, how technique could transform food, and how patience and attention could elevate even plain frontier meals. Despite her shattered right hand, Kate discovered she could still cook by adapting her methods. She relied on her left hand, braced bowls and pans creatively, and worked more slowly and carefully. The process was painful and exhausting, but the concentration it required helped dull the constant ache and kept her mind from drifting toward despair. The very next day, she began cooking in earnest, preparing large batches of stews, roasts, and pies using stored supplies and herbs gathered the previous summer. When she had cooked more food than she could use herself, Kate loaded it into her wagon and drove into Broken Ridge. She set up a small food stand in the town square, selling home-cooked meals to anyone who could pay. The food was excellent, the prices fair, and word spread quickly. Cowboys, miners, and townspeople, tired of poor saloon meals, became regular customers. Kate ran her stand 3 days a week, spending the remaining days cooking more food and tending to her ranch as best she could. People noticed her splinted hand and asked what had happened. Kate smiled quietly and said it was an accident, that it was healing slowly. What no one knew was that every penny she earned went into a separate fund. Money she did not touch for daily survival. She was saving for something specific, something that required patience and precise timing. Kate also listened. She paid close attention whenever Jessup's name came up, learning his habits, routines, and business dealings. She had learned long ago that information was more powerful than force. Her kitchen became both workspace and war room, a place where she cooked food for the town and quietly planned her revenge, her throbbing hand serving as a constant reminder of why she would not stop. Many months passed slowly and autumn gradually turned to winter, covering the entire valley in thick blankets of snow and making daily life significantly harder for everyone trying to survive in the unforgiving Colorado mountains. Kate's hand healed with agonizing slowness, and following Dr. Morrison's detailed instructions with religious devotion, she forced herself to exercise it every single day despite pain that frequently brought tears to her eyes. She forced the stiff, unwilling fingers to bend and straighten against their resistance, worked constantly to regain strength and flexibility that the doctor had warned she might never fully recover. The prescribed exercises hurt almost as intensely as the original injury had, but Kate had never been someone who quit when things got difficult, and she was absolutely not about to start giving up now when so much was at stake. During this long winter of healing and planning, Kate continued running her food business in town with steady efficiency, gradually becoming known throughout Broken Ridge and the surrounding areas for her excellent cooking and her remarkable quiet strength of character. People genuinely admired how hard she worked despite her obvious injury, how she never complained about her circumstances or asked for sympathy or special treatment. What these well-meaning people did not see was the other side of Kate's activities, the careful planning and meticulous preparation she was doing in private for a reckoning that was still many months away but growing more concrete and detailed in her mind with each passing day. Kate learned through her various customers and through careful questions that never seemed like anything more than innocent friendly curiosity that Clayton Jessup was planning an elaborate celebration for the coming spring. He had successfully secured a major contract to supply beef to army posts scattered throughout the entire territory, a lucrative deal worth many thousands of dollars that would make him one of the wealthiest and most politically powerful men in the entire region. Jessup was planning to throw a huge party at his ranch to celebrate this business triumph, intending to invite all the important and influential people from Broken Ridge and all the surrounding communities, planning to serve elaborate expensive food and premium whiskey imported from back east, essentially showing off his wealth and power and success to everyone who mattered in territorial society and politics. When Kate first heard specific details about this planned celebration through the town gossip network, she immediately saw her perfect opportunity with crystal clarity. She understood intuitively and with absolute certainty that this party meant to demonstrate Jessup's success and dominance was actually going to become the stage for his complete humiliation and total downfall. that the very event specifically designed to celebrate his power and wealth would instead reveal his cruelty to everyone and destroy his reputation forever throughout the entire territory. Several weeks before Clayton Jessup's planned celebration, Kate encountered his ranch foreman in town and approached him with what appeared to be a simple business proposal. She explained politely that she had heard about the upcoming party and would like to cater the event, noting that she had built a strong reputation for excellent cooking and could provide food impressive enough for important guests. The foreman was wary. He remembered exactly who Kate was and knew about the violent history between her and Jessup. Kate calmly assured him she held no grudges, that her injured hand had been an unfortunate accident, and that she was merely a practical businesswoman seeking honest work. Reluctantly, the foreman agreed to pass along her offer. After some consideration, and likely some private amusement, Jessup accepted. He found the idea of Kate Hayes serving food at his celebration deeply satisfying, seeing it as proof that he had broken her and reduced her to hired help. In his mind, her presence in his kitchen confirmed his victory. He never considered that by hiring her, he had made the most dangerous mistake of his life. Kate threw herself into preparations with an intensity that might have seemed excessive had anyone looked closely. Instead, her focus was mistaken for professionalism. She spent weeks designing an elaborate menu, choosing dishes meant to impress both palate and pride. She ordered premium ingredients from Denver, spending much of the money she had saved over the winter on fine meats, fresh produce, rare herbs, and costly spices unavailable in Broken Ridge. In her cabin kitchen, she practiced relentlessly, refining techniques and timing until every dish met her exacting standards. At the same time, Kate was preparing something else, something no one suspected. She had not forgotten her mother's teachings about plants and herbs, including which could heal and which could harm. Growing wild in the surrounding mountain meadows was white snakeroot, a plant Kate knew made meat and milk poisonous when consumed by humans. The resulting illness, known as milk sickness, caused severe weakness, nausea, vomiting, and sometimes death. Kate also knew the poison acted slowly, taking days to fully manifest depending on the amount consumed. Throughout late winter and early spring, Kate carefully gathered white snakeroot from remote areas, drying and processing it using techniques once meant for medicine. This time, she was not healing. Her plan was elegant in its simplicity and justice. She would poison Jessup and his men at their own celebration, turning their greed and appetite against them. Yet despite everything she had endured, Kate did not intend to kill. She wanted them to suffer as she had suffered, to lose what they had tried to take from her, but she would not become a murderer. Kate calculated the dosage with painstaking care, determining an amount that would cause violent illness without permanent damage or death. It required precise measurements, knowledge of the human body, and absolute control. She also had to ensure that no innocent guest would be harmed. That problem led to the final brilliance of her plan. Kate prepared 2 complete sets of dishes, foods identical in appearance but entirely different in content. The poisoned dishes were placed in specific serving trays she personally controlled and directed to the table where Jessup and his 4 ranch hands would sit together. The clean food was served to all other guests. As the caterer, Kate would manage the flow of dishes herself, and no one would question her authority. By the time the plan was complete, Kate was ready. Jessup believed he had won. He believed her broken hand had ended her resistance. He believed the celebration would mark his triumph. What he did not understand was that Kate Hayes had turned patience into a weapon, and that the reckoning he deserved was already prepared, waiting to be served. The day of Clayton Jessup's grand celebration finally arrived with absolutely perfect weather conditions, bringing bright warm sunshine and mild temperatures that made the valley look stunningly beautiful and welcoming, with nature itself providing a gorgeous backdrop for what was supposed to represent Jessup's greatest personal and business triumph. Kate arrived at Jessup's ranch house very early in the morning, driving a wagon completely loaded with supplies and ingredients and cooking equipment, and she immediately and authoritatively took over the large ranch house kitchen, efficiently transforming it into her personal domain where she worked with intense focused concentration throughout the entire day. She had hired 2 reliable women from town to assist with the serving and cleaning duties, women she had worked with successfully before and trusted completely to follow her specific instructions without asking unnecessary questions or creating problems. Kate cooked steadily all day long without significant breaks, preparing dish after magnificent impressive dish, filling the entire ranch house with aromas so delicious and enticing that they made everyone's mouth water in eager anticipation of the feast to come. Guests began arriving in the afternoon, important and influential people from all over the territory, including successful ranchers and prominent businessmen and territorial politicians, and even the territorial governor himself had made the substantial journey to attend Jessup's celebration and publicly demonstrate his political support and approval. As the sun began to set in spectacular fashion, painting the sky with brilliant colors, and the party moved into full swing with music and dancing and loud conversation, Kate directed the serving of all the food with calm, unshakable precision and careful attention to every detail. The elaborate main course was a magnificent beef roast, perfectly cooked until tender and seasoned with expensive imported spices, accompanied by rich brown gravy and fresh roasted vegetables and warm bread that Kate had baked from scratch that very morning. She made absolutely certain through careful personal supervision that the dishes containing the poisoned food went directly and exclusively to Jessup's table, where he sat in the place of honor surrounded by his 4 loyal ranch hands, who had been present that terrible night when they held Kate down and laughed while Jessup deliberately crushed her hand with a rock. Kate watched carefully from her position near the kitchen doorway as Jessup and his men ate with obvious enthusiasm and satisfaction, complimenting the exceptional food loudly enough for other guests to hear clearly, with Jessup even calling Kate out into the main dining room to publicly praise her cooking in front of all his important and influential guests, clearly enjoying what he mistakenly believed was his complete and total victory over the woman who had foolishly dared to challenge his authority and power. Kate accepted the compliments and praise with a slight modest smile and a respectful nod of acknowledgement, her eyes meeting Jessup's directly for just one brief moment, and if he had been paying genuinely close attention instead of being drunk on his own sense of triumph and superiority, he might have seen something dangerous and knowing in that look, something that would have warned him that this evening was not going to end anywhere close to the way he confidently expected. The party continued late into the night with increasingly loud music and energetic dancing and heavy drinking and boisterous celebrating, and Kate quietly supervised the packing up of her supplies and equipment before leaving discreetly with her 2 helpers, calmly accepting her full payment in cash from Jessup's ranch foreman and driving her now empty wagon back toward her own small ranch under a spectacular sky absolutely filled with countless brilliant stars. She felt absolutely no guilt whatsoever about what she had just done. Only a deep, profound satisfaction that justice was finally being properly served after so many months of patient waiting and careful planning, that the scales were finally being balanced in exactly the way they needed to be balanced. 3 days after the celebration, troubling reports spread through Broken Ridge that Clayton Jessup and several of his ranch hands were gravely ill. Dr. Morrison was called to Jessup's ranch and found all 5 men in miserable condition, weak, vomiting, and barely able to stand. The symptoms pointed unmistakably to a severe case of milk sickness, yet the source made no sense. No one else who attended the party was sick, despite eating what appeared to be the same food. The contradiction baffled the doctor. He treated the symptoms as best he could, but there was no true cure for milk sickness. Recovery depended on time and the body's ability to purge the toxin before lasting damage occurred. Jessup and his men would survive, but they were completely incapacitated, confined to bed for weeks, unable to ride, work, or exert control over their ranch. For Kate, this was only the beginning. With Jessup bedridden and his ranch hands equally disabled, his operation ground to a halt. Hundreds of cattle meant for delivery to army posts wandered unattended across his range. The army contract Jessup had boasted about carried strict deadlines. Failure to deliver would mean losing the contract and facing severe financial penalties, possibly ruinous ones. Kate moved quickly. She went directly to the Army procurement officer overseeing the beef supply contract and made a bold proposal. Calm and professional, she explained that Jessup was clearly unable to meet his obligations and that she was prepared to deliver the cattle on schedule if the contract were transferred to her. The officer was skeptical. Kate ran a small ranch, and this was a massive undertaking. But Kate came prepared. She presented a detailed plan outlining how she would gather the cattle, hire experienced cowboys, and supplement any shortages with her own herd. Pressed by deadlines and impressed by her preparation, the officer agreed to a provisional transfer of the contract. Against expectations, Kate delivered the first shipment on time. The cattle met all quality standards, the numbers were accurate, and the delivery was efficient. Impressed, the procurement officer confirmed Kate as the permanent contractor and expanded the agreement to include additional future deliveries. In a matter of weeks, Kate went from running a struggling ranch to becoming one of the territory's primary beef suppliers, earning more than she had ever imagined possible. By the time Clayton Jessup recovered enough to grasp what had happened, his empire was already destroyed. The army contract he had relied on for power and wealth was gone. His ranch hands had drifted away in search of steady work. His reputation as an untouchable force in the valley had collapsed. Worst of all, he had been outmaneuvered completely by the woman he thought he had broken. Jessup eventually understood that his illness had not been chance. But he could prove nothing, and even if he could, there was nothing left to reclaim. Kate Hayes had taken everything he valued without firing a single shot. The man who believed violence made him powerful was undone by patience, intelligence, and perfect timing. What Jessup never realized was that the moment he crushed Kate's hand, he set into motion his own destruction, and by the time he saw it clearly, it was already far too late. Kate Hayes lived to the age of 73, remaining active in managing her ranch almost until the very end of her long, productive life. She died peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1925 in the same cabin she had repaired with her own hands more than 50 years earlier. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people from throughout Colorado and neighboring territories whose lives she had touched in countless positive ways. Kate's will reflected her deepest values, establishing funds to help women start businesses and providing scholarships for education. The story of Kate Hayes teaches lessons that remain powerfully relevant more than a century later. She demonstrated that quiet determination and careful strategic planning can be far more effective than loud aggression. She proved conclusively that gender was no barrier to success for someone willing to work intelligently and persistently. She showed that there were paths to justice besides violence. Kate's decision to keep cooking after her hand was Broken Carrie's profound symbolic meaning. By continuing to cook with a broken hand, she refused to let injury steal her identity. By using cooking as her weapon for revenge, she turned something that seemed weak into something devastatingly powerful. In the end, Kate's story transcends one woman's fight against cruel men. It represents the human capacity to overcome terrible circumstances through intelligence and unbreakable will. Kate Hayes cooked her way to victory with a broken hand, creating a story that continues inspiring people generations later. She became a legend not through violence but through refusing to be broken, proving that sometimes the strongest weapon is a spirit that will not surrender no matter what obstacles stand in the way.